Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Welcome back, students. So we are on online lecture number 8 of Programming Fundamental course. Today, inshallah, we are going to further discuss user-defined functions because there are a lot of things that need to be understood while you people are working on user-defined functions. So today's agenda is we are going to further discuss how to call a function, function parameters, function arguments, function return type, function overloading, and a default parameter. Function having a default parameter. So with that, let us move on. So in the previous lecture, we people were discussing about the default parameter function. So if a function is called without providing any value or parameter to it, so what happens? So then at that time you can define the default parameter inside these parentheses. So yeah, you can see that we have a default parameter which is called country having a value of Norway, and the data type is string. So this is called default function parameter. So the first time the function is called, we are providing the value of Sweden to my function. So the Sweden value is copied to this country variable. So at that time the Norway value will be overridden. Then we print the value of country which is Sweden, and then we call the same function once again, and then we provide the value of or the string of India. So India is now stored in the country. Because country is variable, it can store many values. So with that we can like so with that we can like uh, print the value of country which is now India. So the third time when we call a function, we are not providing it any value. So that case the default value will be activated. So in that case the value of country is Norway, so Norway will be printed. Remember, whenever you call a function, the control stops at the main function, and the control goes to the user defined function, and the computer processor is now executing these statements. So at that time when you provide no parameter, no argument, so the default parameter is activated. So country has now the value of Norway, and Norway is printed, and then we go to the next line using this escape sequence. So at the fourth line we are passing the value of USA. We are providing the value of USA to the country variable. So this value is copied into this country variable. The control stops here, and then we print the value of country which in currently is USA. And now after the execution of a program, we have printed Sweden, India, Norway, and USA. So you can also provide the default parameter to a function. It's up to you how you use the user defined function. But for the C++ programmer, C++ language is very much flexible. You can work around, you can like solve any problem using C++ user defined function. So with that, let us move on and let us see what we can do more with the function. A parameter with a default value is often known as an optional parameter. So this is like optional. You can write it, you cannot write it. It's up to you. If you do not write it, then there will be no compile time error because it is optional. From the example above, country is an optional parameter and Norway is the default value. So I think this is now clear to you. We can also have multiple parameter inside a user defined function. Inside the function, you can add as many parameters as you want. Note that when you are working with multiple parameters, so this is important, the function call must have the same number of arguments. So the function call must have the same number of arguments as there are parameter. So the number of argument must match the number of parameters, otherwise you will get a compile time error. And the data type must also match with the data type of the arguments. Data type must match with the data type of parameter, and the argument must be passed in the same order. So this is an important point. So let me repeat it again. Note that when you are working with multiple parameters, the function called must have the same number of arguments. So what does it mean? The same number of parameters that you have defined in the function. So the number of argument must also be the same, and the argument must be passed in the same order. So this is what you have to keep in mind. Otherwise, if the number of argument is different from the number of parameters, you will get a compile time error, or the number of argument is not passed in the same order as they are defined in the parameter list, so you will get a compile time error. So here is a simple example. You can see that we are passing two values to my function. The first one is string called fname, the second one is integer called age. We have this program where we are including the header file iostream for working with input output data, for using it with the cout statement and the cin statement, and then we are also including string because we are using string in our program. So you can see here that the the main function is executed, and inside main function there is three calls to the my function. So in the first call, my function, we are passing liam and 3 as the argument. So liam and 3, it's make 2, and fname and age, these are also true. The argument, the number of argument matches with the number of parameters, so it's okay, and the order must match. So here we have this first variable is string, so you have to first provide the first argument must be string, and here the second parameter is integer, so the second argument must be integer. So with that, you call this my function and fname, and then whatever is in double quotes is printed, and then you also print the age. So then you called my function for the second time, passing Jenny and the age as 14, and then these values are transferred here, copied to fname and age, and then they are printed. And then for the third time, you are passing Anja and 13 as the argument. So you have noticed here that the number of argument is same as the number of our parameter, and the order is also same. So if you write 3 here first and liam, you are writing liam after 3, so you will get a compile time error because the order in the function is different. So with that, let us move on and let us discuss what are C++ return values and how we can return values using the C++ return keyword. The void keyword used in the previous example indicates that the function should not return a value. If you want the function to return a value, you can use a data type such as integer, string, etc. instead of void, and use the return keyword inside the function. So a function can also return a value. If the function is returning integer value, use integer data type as the return type of the function. If the function is returning a string, use string data type as its return type. Remember that whenever we use a main function, like in this case, you notice that the return type of main function is integer. And I told you in the very first lecture that we are going to discuss this integer at the point where we are discussing functions and functions return value. So in the first lecture or in the first few lectures, you, even if I told you, you would not have any idea of like what is happening here because we haven't studied function. So once you study function, then you will come to know that function have a return type, it can return some data, and then you can understand that what is integer here. So integer means that main is returning the value, integer value, returning to who? Giving the value to who? To the C++ compiler, telling the compiler that every statement inside my body has been executed and I am at the last stage and I'm at the last instruction, and the last instruction has provided me the integer value of 0, or it can be any integer value. So this means that program has executed successfully. So just as we have integer return type in the main, we can also have integer return type of the user defined function, just as my function has int as a return type. It means that my function will return integer value as its return type. So what are we doing here? We are calling this function my function and providing 3 as an argument. This argument is copied to this variable x where it is stored, and then now this variable x acts like a local variable to this my function. It means that my function only knows about x. It is not known or not recognized outside of this my function. So you cannot directly use this variable x here in the main, because x has a different scope. It has a local scope to my function. So that is why x is a local variable. If you want x to be accessed both by my function and by main function, then you can define it over here somewhere and make it as a global variable. We are going to discuss about local and global variable further inshallah in the next lecture. But for now, remember that x is a local variable. It is only accessed, it can only be accessed by my function. So what we are doing here, we are adding 5 plus x. So what is the value of x? The value of x is provided by us in the main function. So it's 3. 5 plus 3 is 8. So you are going to return the value of 8 and the value will be returned over here. So the moment 8 is returned here, we will cout statement is going to print it out on the screen. So with that, let me check out the time. Okay, we still have 9 minutes. Okay, with that, we are I think doing well. And here you have another example of how to pass value to a function. So in this case, we have main function. The program execution starts from here, and then we are calling my function once again. The function prototype and the body is defined over here. So we are calling my function and 5,3. So 5 will be copied into the variable x, whereas 3 will be copied into the variable y. And then what are we doing? We are adding these two variables, and the result of addition operation is returned back to this main function. So that is why we have integer. That is why we have integer return type here. So with that, the value 8 will be returned to this part, or to this part of your program, and then it will be printed out. So it's very simple. A function, you can provide data to a function, and then the function can also provide data you as a return value. Here is another example. You can also store the value returned by a function into a separate variable, just as we are viewing it here. So we have a variable integer z, and then it is assignment operator. And what are we assigning to the variable z? We are assigning the variable z the value returned by my function. So first we are providing 5 and 3 to the my function, and then 5 and 3 gets added inside the body of my function. It becomes 8, and then the value is returned, and that is why we are writing integer here. So the value is returned back to the main function. So here we will get the value 8. So this value 8 will be stored inside the variable z. So now you can print the value of z, which is 8 here, and then we get 8 as a output value. So with that, let us move on. There is an advanced topic called pass by a reference. The variable passed by a reference. One thing is variable passed by value, where we are passing the value of a variable, whereas there is another concept called pass by reference. The reference you mean is called an address. In this case, we are passing the address of a variable, not the value of a variable. Remember that whenever you declared a variable and you assign a value to declare to a variable, then 4 things are attached to that variable. The first one is the data type of a variable, then the name of the variable, the value stored inside that memory location inside that variable, and then the last thing is the address given to that point. So just as you people have home addresses, a C++ memory location also have addresses. So when you say pass by reference, it means that we are providing the address of a variable in the function call. So in the example from the previous page, we used normal variables when we passed parameters to a function. You can also pass a reference to a function. So this is an important point. You can also pass a reference to a function. This can be useful when you need to change the value of the argument. So whenever you in the function, in the user defined function, needs to change the actual value of the arguments, you can do it by using the reference of a variable. So we are going to see it using an example. So you can copy this example and then paste it on the code blocks and understand it and run it. So you will get detailed intuitive of what is happening. So in this case, we have a user defined function called swap numbers, swap nums. It is accepting two values, integer x and integer y. So you must be asking, what is this sign? This is ampersand sign. It means that now this variable x and variable y are capable of storing the address of a variable. They become a reference variable. So whenever you see this ampersand sign, it means that normal variable values won't be stored in x and in y. Then what will be stored? The addresses of the variable passed will be stored inside x and y. So then what you do, you copy x into z. It means that you copy the address of x into z, whatever is inside x, and then the value of y is copied into x, and then the address stored in z is copied into y. So this is how you swap these numbers. So we are going to discuss this user defined function, but I think I'm going to discuss it once more. But let us first see what is happening in the main function. So in the main function, you declare two variables. First num, assign it the value of 10. It is an integer variable. And then another integer variable called second num, assign it the value of 20. And then you print out the values of both of these variables. So before swap, \n, go to the new line, you print the first number, and then you print the second number, and then go to the next line, and then we are calling the swap number function. So in this case, in the first num and the second num, we are passing the address of the first num and the second num. So how does it know that we are passing the address? Because when it sees these two variable, when the compiler notice these two variable and notice the ampersand sign, it means that now I'm not going to pass the value of variable. I have to pass the address of first num and the second num. So the address of first num is passed and copied into variable x, and the address of second num is passed and copied into the variable y. So because we have now addresses, we can change the actual value. We can swap the actual value of first num and second num. So what we are doing here, we are like initially x is having a value of, you know that x is having value of what? The first num, x is having value of 10, and y is having value of 20. So the job of this user defined function is to swap these values, like make x to store 20 and make y to store 10. So what we do, we define a separate variable, and in our case it is called z, and then we assign first we assign the value of x to the z. So z becomes 10. Still x has the value of 10, and then in this statement x is assignment operator y. So now x becomes what? X becomes, so what is inside y? It is 20. So x has now the updated value of x is 20. And then in this last statement, we also update the value of y, an assignment operator, and give it the value of whatever is stored inside z. So it is 10. So now the newly updated value of x and y are, you can see the newly updated value of x and y. X is 20 and y is 10. So we were successfully able to swap the values of x and y, and this is what we wanted. And the same effect will be reflected in the main program because we are working with addresses. So address will enable that whatever you apply changes to a variable, so that changes is also reflected to whoever are using that variable, irrespective of the scope of the variable. So now if you print the first num and the second num, you will see that the first num will have the value of 20 and the second num will have the value of 10. So we are successfully able to swap the values of x and y. So there is another term called C++ function overloading, but I think I should stop here because it will be very difficult for you people to grasp all these concepts. So inshallah, I'm going to discuss it in the next lecture. If you have some queries, some question, you can post it on the Google group, and I'm happy to answer all of your queries. I'll see you in the next lecture. Till then, take care and Allah Hafiz.